Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Shredlord here from Thralls of Metal, and we are proud to present you another excellent album review with Electric Hellfire Thunderbolts. I already, of course, have said my name, Shredlord.
Necrotic Nick.
And the album in question is, of course, the debut album of KK Downing, formerly of Judas Priest, KK's Priest.
Sermons of the Sinner. This again comes out on the 1st of October on EX1 Records. Now, this formed in 2019 in, of course, the UK, but also the US because this also features Tim Ripper Owens on vocals. And I don't know if I want to call this like a revenge album, but I think there is still like a little bit of that animosity because of KK Downing's departure from Judas Priest. I don't think it was on the best of terms, and I think this is KK doing the proving ground things like, well, I was a big writer in that band, I contributed a lot of stuff, and he did. So he is striking out on his own, and rather than calling it just KK Downing, KK's Priest, I feel like there's just a little bit of a rub there.
Slight rub, and by slight, a very aggressive rub.
Sandpaper rub.
It's been weird. It started out, I think, as KK jamming with the very early drummer of Judas Priest at a live show, and everyone was like, damn, you know, KK sounded pretty good, which he did. Then it ended up being, you know, he's been writing some songs, and then he wanted back into Judas Priest, and Rob Halford, I think, and him have some beef, and that, of course, didn't happen, and he was like, you know what? He got fired up, the old Dave Mustaine path of inspiration, and here we arrive at Sermon of the Sinners.
This is an interesting album, and unavoidably, it does sound like Judas Priest. Before we get into it, we are greeted to the intro incarnation, which is 80s level cheese. There's some spoken word that introduces the first actual track, the first single, I believe, Hellfire Thunderbolt, which they never explain what the hell that is, but that sounds so goddamn 80s metal. Yeah, I mean, you gotta respect the Hellfire Thunder thingy.
I actually like the intro as far as being a little different. The spoken word was a little different. You're hearing a lot of intros on albums lately, over the past year and a half, where it just sounds like soundscapes. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really go anywhere. So at least this had a purpose, whether you liked it or not. At least it kind of set it up. It had your atmosphere to begin with, and then the spoken word kind of starts the story.
Yeah, but the song actually pretty decent. A solid opening track. It's a good pace setter. It's nice and aggressive from the rip. And, you know, it's riff driven as we expect it to be. And one of the things I really liked in this was the production. It kind of feels a little bit more organic. Like it has kind of a warm feel to it. The guitar tone isn't like super processed. It actually feels kind of raw and natural. Drums sound really good. The only issue I had in terms of production was an issue I had in another realm would be Ripper. He's a decent vocalist, but man, they drench his vocals in a lot of effects, and his production on the vocals, it just sounds like it doesn't really match up with the production of the music itself. That and really cheesy lyrics, but that's kind of to be expected anyway. I mean, I love Judas Priest, some of the lyrics are cheesy, but they're fun.
I think going into this, we definitely knew what we were getting ourselves into, man. This is going to be one of the OGs of classic heavy metal, and I didn't think he was going to put out a death metal album.
Nope.
I had a feeling it was going to be very much a throwback album, and it was. However, there are touches that surprised me.
Yeah.
Namely on the very last track, which we'll touch back on later on, but The Return of the Sentinel. It has this
solid song.
And even the second to last track, Hail for the Priest, there is some clean sounds and some soundscapes going on there and some clean guitar that you really don't hear or haven't heard in Judas Priest. It almost at times sounded a little maiden-y, if I would.
I think you can totally bring that up. Actually, I would say the beginning section to Raise Your Fists has a very distinct, like, Maiden-like guitar harmony. And I think all throughout Return of the Sentinel, there's definitely some Maiden-esque moments. Hell, I would even compare that song in terms of, like, overall feel and pace to one of my favorite songs of all time, Thin Lizzy's Emerald.
Great song.
It just kind of rocks this main riff and bounces solos back and forth. It's got a kind of epic feel to it. And then it kind of tapers off towards the end, but we'll get to that later. When it came down to delivering classic old school heavy metal, there's some really solid songs in here. The title track in particular, I think, is one of the best songs on here. A straightforward ripper. I think it's one of the shorter tracks on here, and it just gets right to the point, and the point is riffs, high energy, and just delivering a fucking classic 80s ruckus.
And while it maintains a lot of that classic throwback Judas Priest sound that he helped pioneer and engineer, you still had other elements from the other musicians that you generally wouldn't hear on a Judas Priest album, namely in the bass.
Yes.
The bass player is really good and very active, and I love a lot of the bass parts. Ian Hill is a very meat and potatoes kind of bass player and just kind of holds it down. This guy on this album is not afraid to let loose on some phrasing and some solos and lead type stuff. And it sounds really cool and really good with those classic throwback heavy metal riffs.
And the way it's mixed, the bass is actually pretty prominent in there.
Poppin'.
So, yeah,
Love
you can really hear these cool, clever bass licks throughout.
As far as pacing on the album goes, I feel like this album took me on a slight roller coaster ride. And what I mean by that is, when we started the album, I enjoyed the first couple songs. However, the middle of the album really goes down in terms of grabbing me and in terms of holding my attention. Songs like Brothers of the Road and Metal Through and Through and Raise Your Fist, it just has this campiness that reminds me of like when Priest would do like United or Parental Guidance and stuff like that, and I didn't really dig that. It wasn't until the last two tracks of this album to where it really reeled me back in and took me back into a more serious kind of balls to the wall heavy metal.
Yeah, the middle of this album was kind of a chore to get through. It's like you got a nice toasted brioche bun on either side, but inside is rotted meat and maybe a dog turd. But, I mean, you know, the bun was nice.
But I will say this, at least they were only 3 to 5 minute song tops. So even though I didn't enjoy them, it wasn't like it was some 9, 10, 11 minute song that I didn't have to like, you know, grit my teeth and bear through it. At least they were more short. However, they definitely were not something that was that enjoyable, especially compared to the beginning and the end of the album.
Raise Your Fist is pure, like, just derivative montage rock. Like, there really is nothing about that song I really enjoyed, except for the Iron Maiden-like licks, but I want to enjoy some Priesty stuff, and the Priesty stuff on there is, unfortunately, the weakest moments on that song. The Iron Maiden kind of harmonies, which kind of fit, didn't really work, and oh god, the lyrics, and it's generally not something I bring up, but when you can hear them so clearly, because, you know, Ripper's right at the front of the mix telling you about metal roads and stuff, leather,
holding hands and fucking,
we're skipping through a field of metal
making
daisies
out in our denim jackets. What?
I don't know, metal stuff. But after a while, man, you get real tired of the tropes and cliches, and with Rob Halford doing it, it's more endearing. That's the era that he grew up in. Ripper, not as much, but that is the era that he absolutely loved, and he definitely echoes that.
I think Rob Halford still does it in a more clever way, at least in comparison to this album. Now, I do enjoy the Ripper on albums that he did with Iced Earth, and I love the album Jugulator that he did with Judas Priest. So I like his vocal styles, but I also think that the lyrics on this are not strong in comparison to something like a Jugulator. And even though, you know, songs like Burn in Hell are pretty straightforward, it's not like they're trying to disguise what they're saying to you, or Death Row or anything like that. But yeah, it was very upfront and very, very campy.
And there are 2 longer tracks on here. We already brought up one with Return of the Sentinel, which is the longest track in almost 9 minutes. And I would say 85% of that is some of the best material on this entire album.
Agreed.
But it has this long-winded, like, clean outro.
I don't mind it as much as he does.
I mind it because it feels like it ends and then it just starts again. It's like, why is it still going? I feel like you had a logical closing point, and Ripper's oohing and ahhing, and we could have ended it, and now we're fading out, and it's taken a long time. But the whole front half of that song absolutely whoops ass. And then we have Metal Through and Through, which kind of feels a little slapped together. Like, it has really cool parts in it, especially the bridge in it, I think is really awesome. But it's just kind of all over the place, and it's over 8 minutes. And that was kind of a chore to get through. Plus, I mean, what do you expect the lyrics to sound like for Metal Through and Through? It's yeah.
Very metally. But to regain some strength and some positive snowballing on this album, the last track is easily one of my favorites, if not my favorite. The Return of the Sentinel. Obviously, for all you Judas Priest fans out there, the song The Sentinel from Defenders of the Faith, one of my favorite Judas Priest albums, is a badass track. And this basically tells the tale of what happens to the Sentinel as life goes on. And the music video was all cartoony and stuff and kind of illustrated it. Lyric video as well.
There's a Gundam, I think, in it.
Yeah, that was kind of cool, though.
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
But the song is just awesome, and hearing him reference some of the riffs from the Sentinel, but in a new way with different harmonies and stuff and the leads, it got me really excited. And something that definitely saves it for me is KK's guitar playing. Now, once again, for fans of Judas Priest, KK learned how to play guitar for like 2 weeks and then started the band. So throughout the career, he wasn't as always, or still to this day probably is not good of a lead player as Glenn Tipton. Glenn Tipton writes incredible solos. Like, he thinks them out, and there's ebb and flow, and there's purpose. KK comes from the school of just letting it fly. And that's what he does a lot on here. Not only was the guitar riffs nice and crunchy, and I did dig that, he basically just said, fuck you, and played a bunch of leads. And I know in the press, the one thing he said is, oh, he should have fought for more leads, this, that, and the other. But, I mean, he did play a lot of leads in Judas Priest. Let's not get it twisted. Did he play as many as Glenn? No, probably not. But let's be honest with each other here. Glenn Tipton is in a league above KK when it comes to leads.
Yes.
KK is an amazing songwriter. And as his career has gone on and the longer he's been playing, he's become a much better lead player over time. And now he's playing some of the best leads he's ever played. Even back when Angel of Retribution came out from Judas Priest, the opening track, Judas Rising, he has a solo in there. And I remember watching the live concert for the first time and going, wow, really being impressed, because not only was it fast and shreddy, but it had some memorable parts in it and things that would stick in your head. It wasn't just mile a minute. And I think he tries to show that here, although he does go very mile a minute a lot of times. I think he's doing that for the reason that he's trying to show the world that he's a much better guitar player lead-wise than he's given credit for. So KK is just shitting leads all over the place, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm glad he's just out there fucking ripping.
I mean, honestly, like, there are generally multiple leads per song. Like, there's definitely some on here that have 1 or 2 leads on it, and maybe even 3. My issue was, like, there's some really good leads on here that really stand out. I think, of course, the last track, Turn the Sentinel, that has some really killer lead work on it. Like, some of KK's best, I think. There's some really memorable parts. But a lot of the time, he just goes for the mile a minute stuff, and it's a blur of notes. Now, granted, I like shreddy leads. I mean, these sound more appropriate for, like, thrash albums. Like, squealy dive bombs, just, just going at it. But they don't stand out very much. I wish his leads stood out as much as the riffs. But, you know, that lead thing isn't necessarily what he was known for. He was known as a songwriter and a riff writer, and he wrote some songs and some killer riffs on here. So, yeah, I mean, this is his project. He's striking on his own. He's, you know, writing all the fucking songs, and for the most part, he did all right.
So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give this debut album a 3 out of 5. I think it is not as strong as it could have been, but there are moments on here that make me bang my fucking head, give me goosebumps, and make me remember why I loved Judas Priest in the first place. KK was a big part of Judas Priest. Richie's there now, and Richie does a great job, but I don't think Judas Priest will ever write classic albums like British Steel and Stained Glass and Painkiller. That is Glenn and KK. And we'll probably never see that, but that's okay. KK's Priest coming out strong, 3 out of 5. I'm anxious to hear what comes out next, and I'm hoping that it's a little bit less of the holding hands stuff and a little bit more of the beginning and end where it's just balls to the wall.
I am going to give it 2.5. When this album is really good, it is really good. Like, these are some killer songs that I thought there were absolutely rippers on here. And when it's bad, it's pretty bad. Like, this is kind of a bit of a sandwich. The bun is nice, it's toasted to perfection, buttered and lovely. Sesame seeds, probably. But the substance in the middle, food-ish.
It's a rotten tuna patty.
Yeah, and that was kind of the hard thing to digest, because like when you hear songs that I think are really good, and then you hear the stuff in the middle which is lackluster and kind of just sloppily assembled, I think. There's no middle ground. Like, it's either great or bad. And unfortunately, that whole middle section really hurts this, but I think there's definitely potential here. It definitely shows off that KK can still write some killer fucking songs. Not the biggest fan of Ripper's vocals or them being so processed, and of course lyrics are whatever. But this was still a fun release, and it reminds me of why I still love Judas Priest. I mean, I'm definitely going to check out this project again, but I'm probably going to be leaning a little bit more towards Judas Priest in terms of future releases. I think we'll probably get at least one more here relatively soon.
Get well, Richie Faulkner.
Definitely. But yeah, kind of a so-so start for me, but I'd be willing to check out more by him.
So, if you like the review, please hit the like and subscribe button. It notifies you of when we release new content, which is pretty much every day or every other goddamn day. Also, if you'd like to support us metal knuckleheads, there's a link down below to our Patreon. Also, if you'd like to get yourself one of our sweet digs, we have shirts still available. You can go ahead and send an email to thrallsofmetal@gmail.com with the title shirts, and we'll send you an invoice. Also, we are inching and crawling so close to our 7,500 viewer giveaway. For that to even be possible, thank you very much. We appreciate every single one of you that has made this possible, and we look very much forward to giving away this 8 CD stack, most notably in the stack being the Cannibal Corpse album with the unreleased art of the sexy lady gnawing on the parts.
You can see her pubes.
It's sexy.
Is it? Okay, anyway.
In the video now. Okay.
So with that, thank you very much for watching, and we will catch you later.